Section 7. The home search begins. Selecting the right Arizona property. When we left Ashley in Section 5, she had learned that not every mortgage is the same. Rachel had helped her understand her financing options. Daniel understood the financing structure they expected to use. And Ashley had finally reached the moment she had been waiting for. She looked at Daniel and asked, "Can we please go look at houses now?" Daniel laughed. "Yes, but before we walk into the first house, we have a few things we need to finish." Ashley looks confused. "More paperwork?" Daniel smiles. "A little, but this paperwork explains our relationship before we start looking at properties." This is an important point for Arizona agents. Before the buyer and agent move forward into the home search and showing process, the required buyer representation and agency documents need to be addressed. If you are a realtor, applicable realtor practice requirements concerning a written buyer agreement before touring a home must also be followed. Daniel sits down with Ashley and reviews the applicable buyer-broker employment agreement. He doesn't slide it across the table and say, "Just sign this so I can show you houses." He explains what the agreement actually means: the relationship between Ashley and the brokerage, the services Daniel will provide, the term of the agreement, the buyer's responsibilities, and how brokerage compensation is addressed. This is where many agents make the mistake of avoiding the compensation conversation because it feels uncomfortable. Don't. Ashley should understand what she is agreeing to before Daniel begins providing services under the agreement. Daniel should not simply promise, "Don't worry, the seller will always pay me." The agreement and the actual transaction will determine the parties' obligations and how compensation may be satisfied. Daniel also reviews the applicable agency disclosure and election information with Ashley, so she understands whom Daniel and the brokerage represent. Agency should not become a conversation that happens for the first time after Ashley falls in love with a property. She should understand the representation relationship before they begin the showing process. There may be another disclosure requirement depending on the brokerage. If Daniel's brokerage has an applicable affiliated business relationship with a title company, lender, home warranty company, or another settlement service provider, Daniel must follow the applicable federal disclosure requirements and his brokerage's procedures. Where RESPA's affiliated business arrangement rules apply, the required disclosure concerning the relationship must be provided at the appropriate time, and the consumer generally cannot be required to use the affiliated provider except as permitted by law. Here's the broker tip: know your brokerage before you represent the buyer. Every agent should check with the designated broker regarding the brokerage's requirements for buyer-broker agreements, agency disclosures, affiliated business disclosures, related title or lending companies, home warranty relationships, compensation discussions, and any additional company forms or procedures. Don't assume the procedures at your current brokerage are identical to the brokerage where you worked previously. Daniel answers Ashley's questions, obtains the required signatures and acknowledgments, provides the appropriate disclosures, and makes sure the documents are handled according to brokerage policy. Now he picks up the showing schedule. Okay, now we can go look at houses. Saturday morning arrives. Ashley climbs into her car with a list of properties saved on her phone, and Daniel has prepared a showing schedule. This is where the process starts feeling like real estate to most buyers. But experienced agents know that property selection is not simply about finding the prettiest kitchen or the biggest primary bedroom. A buyer isn't just choosing a house. The buyer is choosing a property, a location, a set of legal rights and restrictions, and potentially years of financial responsibility. The first home Ashley sees is a beautifully remodeled resale in Gilbert. The kitchen has new cabinets, quartz countertops, updated flooring, and exactly the open layout Ashley wanted. Within 5 minutes, she says the sentence every buyer's agent eventually hears: "This is it. I want it." Daniel smiles, but doesn't immediately pull out the purchase contract. Instead, he says, "You may love the house, but let's finish looking at the property." They step into the backyard, examine the visible exterior conditions, discuss the age of major systems based on available information, and begin talking about questions Ashley may want answered. Daniel isn't conducting a home inspection. He is helping Ashley understand that emotional attraction is only one part of property selection. Here's where many agents get into trouble. The buyer asks, "Do you think the roof is good for another 10 years? The agent looks up and says, "Absolutely. It looks fine." Now the agent has made a representation about something that may require professional expertise. Daniel handles it differently. He tells Ashley, "I can point out what we can observe and review available information, but the condition and remaining useful life of the roof should be evaluated by an appropriate professional if that's important to you." That isn't avoiding the question. That's recognizing the boundaries of the real estate license. As they continue looking, Daniel explains that buyers should evaluate more than the physical structure. Ashley may want information about schools, crime statistics, transportation, utilities, zoning, future development, insurance availability, environmental conditions, airports, military facilities, flood hazards, sex offender information, HOA restrictions, property taxes, and other matters depending on what is important to her. Daniel doesn't need to become the expert on every subject. The Arizona Realtors Buyer Advisory is valuable precisely because Arizona buyers may need to investigate numerous matters beyond what a real estate agent can independently verify. An experienced agent doesn't simply hand the advisory to the buyer and say, "Sign this." The agent explains why independent investigation matters. Ashley looks across the street and asks, "Is this a safe neighborhood?" That's a common question, and Daniel knows to be careful. Words such as safe, good, and bad are subjective, and neighborhood discussions can also create fair housing concerns when agents begin describing who lives in an area. Daniel tells Ashley, "I can't guarantee whether an area is safe, but I can help you locate objective resources so you can investigate the things that matter to you." He keeps the conversation focused on Ashley's stated criteria, rather than substituting his personal opinion or steering her toward or away from a community. They move to the second property. This home looks similar online, but Daniel notices that the listing indicates it is subject to a homeowners association. Ashley says, "That's fine. HOAs just maintain the neighborhood, right?" Daniel explains that an HOA may do much more than maintain common areas. Depending on the community and governing documents, there may be assessments, use restrictions, architectural controls, parking rules, rental limitations, pet-related provisions, and other obligations affecting ownership. Ashley will have an opportunity to review applicable information and disclosures during the transaction, but Daniel wants her to understand early that two visually similar houses can involve very different ownership considerations. The third property creates another teaching moment. Ashley sees an enclosed patio that appears to have been converted into additional living space. She says, "Great, that's another 300 square feet." Daniel doesn't assume. Was the work permitted? Is it included in the reported living area? How is it constructed? Does it comply with applicable requirements? Those are questions that may require investigation through public records and appropriate professionals. This is something ADRE investigators and brokers repeatedly encounter in complaints. Someone assumes information is accurate, repeats it to the buyer as fact, and later discovers the assumption was wrong. AAC R428-1101 matters throughout this process because Arizona licensees have duties concerning their clients, fair dealing, and material information. If Daniel knows a material fact affecting the transaction, he cannot simply remain silent, because disclosing it might make Ashley less enthusiastic about purchasing. His responsibility is not to make Ashley love every house. His responsibility is to help her make an informed decision. By the end of the afternoon, Ashley is exhausted. She has seen 6 properties and discovered something important. The house that photographed best online wasn't necessarily the property she liked best in person. One had an HOA restriction she wanted to investigate. Another had an addition that raised questions. One had a layout she couldn't understand from the photographs. The property search is already teaching her to look beyond countertops and paint colors. Then Daniel shows her one final house. Ashley walks through the front door, stops in the living room, and looks around quietly. Daniel has been doing this long enough to recognize the look. She turns around and says, "Daniel, this might actually be the one." Daniel smiles. Finding the house is exciting, but now comes the part where excitement has to become a contract. In the next section, Ashley is going to decide whether she wants to make an offer, and Daniel will need to help her answer one of the most difficult questions buyers ask. What should I offer? Online discussion 1. Before Daniel begins showing Ashley homes, what representation and disclosure issues should he address? Answer. Daniel should make sure the applicable buyer-broker employment agreement and agency disclosure requirements have been properly addressed, and that Ashley understands the representation relationship, services, responsibilities, and compensation provisions. If the brokerage has applicable affiliated business relationships, required disclosures should also be provided at the appropriate time. Daniel should follow the designated broker's policies and the brokerage's specific procedures rather than assuming every company handles these requirements identically. 2. Why is the Arizona Realtors Buyer Advisory an important resource during property selection? Answer. The buyer advisory helps buyers recognize the wide range of issues they may want to independently investigate, including property conditions, governmental matters, environmental concerns, neighborhood information, insurance issues, utilities, and other factors. It reinforces that the buyer should investigate matters important to the decision, rather than relying exclusively on representations from real estate licensees. 3. Ashley asks Daniel whether the neighborhood is safe. What is the better approach? Answer: Daniel should avoid guaranteeing safety or providing subjective neighborhood characterizations. He can direct Ashley toward objective resources that allow her to investigate matters important to her. This helps Ashley make her own informed decision while reducing the risk of inaccurate representations or fair housing concerns associated with steering or subjective descriptions of communities.